Hey everyone, and welcome to Book Lovers Unite. There's this really specific kind of loneliness that's so hard to explain. The kind you can feel in a room full of people you've known your entire life, your family. It's that painful feeling of being totally invisible. Well, today, we're diving into a book that finally gives this feeling a name, all based on the groundbreaking work of Dr. Lindsay C. Gibson. So let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like you were the adult in the room even when you were a kid? Or maybe you felt like you had to shrink yourself, just make yourself smaller to keep the peace at home. If any of that rings a bell, then what we're about to unpack today, it might just be the light bulb moment you've been looking for. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start by defining what this invisible loneliness really is. Then we'll look at 4 parent profiles that can cause it. After that, we'll explore how kids adapt to survive in these environments, the mental traps that keep us stuck, and finally, the best part, the path to a new kind of awareness. It's a really powerful journey. All right, let's get right to the heart of it. What are we actually talking about when we say invisible loneliness? The book gives it a name. Emotional loneliness. It's that deep, aching feeling that there's no one in your life you can share your true self with, your real feelings, your fears, your joys. And this often happens, as the book explains, because emotionally immature parents are, frankly, terrified of deep emotion. They're so wrapped up in their own needs that it creates this kind of emotional black hole where there's just no space left for anyone else. So imagine this. A child is sad or scared, and they go to their parent. But instead of comfort, they get dismissed. Or maybe the parent gets angry. What does that child learn? They learn a devastating lesson. My feelings are a burden. To keep this relationship, I have to hide who I am. You learn that your needs just don't matter. So, how does this emotional immaturity actually show up? Well, Dr. Gibson breaks it down into 4 really distinct profiles. As we go through these, just see if any of these dynamics feel familiar. First up, we have the emotional parent. This is the parent who is completely run by their feelings. If they're upset, the entire house goes into crisis mode. Everyone starts walking on eggshells. And the child? Their job becomes managing the parent's emotions, basically becoming a tiny therapist just to keep things stable. Next is the driven parent. Now, on the outside, this family can look perfect. They're all about achievement, goals, looking good. But for the child, love is totally conditional. It's not about how they feel, it's about what they do. They only really exist in the parent's eyes when they're succeeding, which ties their self-worth completely to their performance. Third, we have the passive parent. And this one can be so confusing because this parent might actually seem really nice, but their defining trait is avoiding conflict at all costs. And that means they won't step in to protect their child from a more difficult, overbearing parent. Their passivity essentially leaves the child to fend for themselves. And finally, there's the rejecting parent. This one is the most straightforward. These parents just want to be left alone. They put up a huge wall, and any attempt by the child to connect is met with irritation. The core lesson the child learns here is a brutal one. My very existence is an annoyance. So when you're a child faced with these kinds of environments, what do? How do you possibly cope? Well, you adapt. You develop these very specific survival roles. Dr. Gibson talks about 2 main styles. First, you have externalizers. They act out. They blame the world. They get into trouble. But if you're the kind of person drawn to a topic like this, chances are you're an internalizer. Internalizers do the exact opposite. They turn inward. They blame themselves, and they try to fix everything by becoming little adults. And here's the real tragedy for internalizers. They become the emotional caretaker for the entire family. But this pattern doesn't just stop in childhood. It becomes their default setting. They get so used to giving and never receiving, they often end up in adult relationships with partners who are just as emotionally needy as their parents were. This leads us right into the 2 biggest mental traps that can keep adult children completely stuck, sometimes for their entire lives. The first trap is something called the healing fantasy. This is the deep, secret belief from childhood that if you can just be perfect enough, if you get the best grades, the best job, if you never cause any trouble, then one day your parents will finally wake up, see you, and give you the love you've always wanted. It's a goal you can chase for a lifetime. And how do you try to achieve that fantasy? You create a role self. You put on a mask. Maybe you become the helper, or the smart one, or the peacemaker. You play this part perfectly to earn approval. But the devastating realization that comes later is that your parents didn't love you. They loved the role you were playing. And this brings us to a metaphor that is just so incredibly powerful. Stop going to the hardware store looking for bread. The absolute hardest part of healing is finally accepting that your parents may simply not have the emotional tools to give you what you need. You're looking for nourishment in a place that just doesn't stock it. So, if you can't get bread at the hardware store, what do you do? Well, this is where it gets empowering. This isn't about blame. It's about gaining a new awareness that finally sets you free. The book offers a really practical strategy. The idea is to shift your mindset. Instead of interacting as a hurt child who's desperate for love, you become a neutral scientist. You just observe their behavior. You notice their immaturity without letting yourself get pulled into the drama. The goal shifts from trying to have a deep relationship to just having polite relatedness. And a huge part of this process is finally claiming your own Bill of Rights. You have the right to set boundaries. You have the right to not be responsible for your parents' happiness. You absolutely have the right to walk away from a toxic conversation. And you have the right to take up space in this world just as you are. And I really want to stress this. The goal here isn't to hate your parents. It's actually about finding compassion for their limitations and realizing they were probably just passing down what they learned. But the most important thing, the real prize, is your freedom. It's giving yourself permission to stop trying to change them and to finally start healing yourself. So, as we wrap up, here's a question to reflect on. Did you recognize any of those 4 parent types today? Sometimes just being able to put a name to a dynamic you've lived with your whole life can be an incredibly powerful first step. Feel free to share in the comments if you're comfortable. And hey, if this explainer hit home for you, please give it a like. It really helps other people find it. And consider sharing it with someone you think might need to hear this message. Here at Book Lovers Unite, we're all about spreading this kind of insight. And, of course, subscribe for more deep dives like this one. So we'll leave you with one final thought. All of this entire framework, is really about giving yourself permission to put your own needs first, maybe for the first time ever. So the real question is, what's one small step you can take, starting today, to reconnect with the true self that's been waiting underneath that mask all along?